Welcome, and thank you for joining me as we look at introducing you to the topic of neurodiversity. The goal of this session is to look at why we need to talk more about neurodiversity, why it's important to understand, and why it's so important within the workplace. So, my name's Adrian Thomas, and I'm here from the Resilience and Wellbeing Company, where we're passionate about this topic of neurodiversity. And we are called the Resilience and Wellbeing Company because we want to allow each individual to thrive as much as they can within the workplace and beyond. Every individual is going to face different challenges, and so supporting them to be resilient and have good well-being for us is a number one goal that any organization should have. Now, before we dig into the content, I just want to let everybody here know that this is your time. For the next 40 to 45 minutes, I want to make sure that you do what you need to feel comfortable, to feel safe, and be ready to learn. Now, I have automatically muted you as you've joined this session, and we're delivering this as a webinar. So we just ask that you're present, and there's no need for you to be on camera as we go through. As we do go through, you're welcome to put any questions that you may have in the chat box, and I've allocated some time towards the end of this session for any questions if you haven't already been covered. So neurodiversity may be something that you know a little bit about already, or it may be something that's completely new to you. And we're really respectful of that here. So do ask anything that comes to mind, and we're happy to answer that for you. As we go through, there's no silly questions. There'll be real variations in knowledge on this topic in the room. And so please feel comfortable asking for clarity or more information if you need it. As I've already mentioned, your well-being is the most important thing in the room, and I'm here to make sure that your well-being is looked after. This session has been designed so that you're able to sit back, to relax, to take in new knowledge, and I'll leave the learning until the Q&A at the end. Now, hopefully you will be able to stay with us throughout the session. However, we are recording this today, so if you need to step away, you'll be able to catch up with the remainder of the video, and we'll send that link out to you. That said, as we go through, feel free to get up, stretch your legs, take me around the house with you if you're working from home today, whatever works for your comfort and supports your own learning style. So let's start by looking at neurodiversity and workplace culture. For neurodivergent individuals to be successful, there needs to be a culture of inclusion. And to us at the Resilience and Wellbeing Company, that really starts at the heart of your business. This isn't about giving the topic lip service. This is really looking at every single process you have in your business, every interaction you have with your teams or your customers, and asking yourself, what can I do to be more inclusive, to help this person to work at their best or to improve this interaction? Now, that can sound huge and actually quite scary or even maybe overwhelming, but you may be surprised at just how small some of those adjustments can be, and how big that positive impact can be by putting them in place. So that actually, when we make a series of small individual adjustments and we add them up, we see just how quickly we make that difference. And as we always say, everyday actions shift culture. So, neurodiversity, what is this word that we keep hearing? What's the topic? Well, ultimately, neurodiversity is the understanding that not all brains operate in the same way. It's the idea that neurological differences are natural and that these differences should not only be respected, but they should be championed and welcomed. Because just as in the same way that we have biodiversity, where we've got all this lovely different wildlife, different plants, different animals adding into an ecosystem, we see that neurodiversity works in exactly the same way. Everyone's unique neurotype adds into that richness of humanity. And we want and we need to have brains that work in different ways, creating a diverse interaction with the world around us. And when we do have this, it means that there are different perspectives, just as there are different lived experiences for people. And when we have all of these different perspectives and people coming at things from different angles, then it's such a benefit in the workplace. Just imagine what it would be like if we all thought the same all the time. What is important, and we really want to clarify this for you, is that neurodiversity is an umbrella term. It's an umbrella term that encompasses all of the different ways of thinking, all of the different types of brains that exist in any society. So it includes everybody. Everyone you know, including yourself, is neurodiverse when they're in a group of more than one. Now, we can't individually be neurodiverse because we only have one brain type, but our team in the workplace will be neurodiverse because it has multiple brain types. Our gym class will be neurodiverse. Our family will be neurodiverse, just as the whole world is neurodiverse. What we do find is quite helpful, though, is understanding some of the shared experiences within this massive umbrella. So some words you may or may not have heard before are neurotypical or neurodivergent. Neurotypical is what's seen as the brain that society is geared towards and understands as the most common. Being neurodivergent, we would be seen as sitting outside of that typical brain structure where we don't fit into society's model of what is normal. We diverge from the typical in some way. And you may also come across the terms neuro-majority, neuro-minority. And in any group, we have neurodiversity. But as an individual, I may be neurodivergent, or I may sit within the neuro-minority, or indeed neuro-majority. And neuro-majority and neuro-minority are sometimes preferred terms over neurodivergent, as using majority and minority doesn't imply that there's a right or wrong, or that there's a preferred or better type. It's just that we have that majority or that minority. Now, during this session, I will use the term neurodivergent mostly, as this is the most used common way of identifying those that are significant neurodifference to the majority. It is important to say, though, that as with all language, those that sit outside of that neuro-majority may have their own preferred terms. For example, they may prefer neuro-minority rather than neurodivergent, or they might prefer neurodivergent versus neurodifferent. What's important, if in doubt, just ask that person if they have a preference and then use that preference. Now, in the Thrive training we deliver, we focus on some of the neurodivergent conditions that you may have already heard of, such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, Tourette syndrome, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, and dysgraphia. And these are what we call the 7 main neurodivergences. And that's where we focus our training sessions, because there's so much more that we can understand when it comes to these 7 neurodifferences. If we can better understand others' lived experiences, as well as the strengths and the skills that having a neurodivergent brain can give to a person, then the more we can support each other to thrive within the workplace. Now, outside of the benefits of understanding those around us and ourselves better in the workplace, this is important in several areas. When employees struggle to work together effectively, it can hinder productivity, it can hinder innovation within the team, and so we'll likely see decreased team productivity and collaboration. Without a supportive environment, neurodivergent employees may leave your company, leading to increased recruitment and training expenses. And it may also be that other employees may leave due to feeling unsupported when it comes to managing or working collaboratively with those that are neurodivergent. The health and safety executive and Deloitte estimate that replacing a single employee can cost up to 1/3 of their annual salary through recruitment, training, lost productivity. For just one employee on minimum wage, that could be over £8,000. And we know that misunderstandings and miscommunications can arise when team members don't understand each other's unique perspectives and communication styles. And this can lead to avoidable HR complaints due to not understanding all types of neurodivergences. Failure to provide reasonable adjustments for those that are neurodivergent can also expose organizations to legal risks and compliance issues if they're unable to prove that they've worked within the Equality Act 2010. A case that is taken to tribunal can cost upwards of £10,000 in legal fees and averages around 48 weeks of time. And if an organization is found culpable, fines can be unlimited under disability discrimination. Just one recent case that centered on the claimant being unfairly dismissed because of their dyslexia led to an award of over £470,000. Now, we could also think about those potential damages to company reputation. Inclusive workplaces are increasingly important to both employees and customers, and a lack of diversity awareness can negatively impact an organization's reputation as well. So where does this sit from a legal standpoint? Well, I'm really hoping that the term reasonable adjustments is something that is familiar to you, you've heard of before, and there is a legal basis for making these when we think about neurodivergence. When it comes to the Equality Act 2010, it's illegal to discriminate against people based on a number of different categories, and these include disability, gender identity, sexual orientation, race. And neurodivergence often fits within the definition of disability under the Equality Act. So, disability is defined within the Equality Act as a physical or a mental condition that has a substantial long term impact on your ability to complete day to day activities. Despite many neurodivergent individuals not identifying as having a disability, they could well be covered under the Equality Act. And so when we're talking about some of these neurodiverse conditions, such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, there's a legal basis for not being discriminated against, as well as that responsibility for organizations to make reasonable adjustments. In fact, the courts recently found that a company had failed to provide reasonable adjustments by not providing training on neurodiversity. And so this led into the manager not being able to support the neurodivergent person. And what I think is important here as well is that it doesn't matter if a person has a formal diagnosis. They don't need to have a note from their doctor defining their autism, for example. A person can self-identify as being autistic or having ADHD as an example, and they may be covered under the Equality Act, meaning they would still be protected. And this is actually quite important in the world we live in at the moment, where it isn't easy to get that medical diagnosis, and there can be real barriers to doing so, such as long waiting lists or that cost of going private. Now, this does mean that we need to be respectful of people's perspectives. Aside from that legal standpoint, putting in reasonable adjustments is just the right thing to do on a human level. And what we see time and time again is putting in reasonable adjustments helps absolutely everybody, both neuro-majority or neuro-minority. And this is what I'm going to look at in a bit more detail today with you. So putting in, for example, an adjustment to your external or internal environments. Let's say making sure there's a culture where if a person needs to move from an open plan office to somewhere where it's a more relaxed space so that they can de-stress, it isn't a negative, but it's actually encouraged for all. This can help a neurotypical person who's having a bad day just as much as it might support that neurodivergent person who is autistic and maybe on the verge of a meltdown. So we're wanting to put things in place that help support those that are neurodivergent, but also improve the lives of everyone where possible. So we're going to focus on some of the outcomes for neurodivergent individuals when they're not supported. Neurodivergent individuals may process information differently, and this leads to challenges in understanding, potentially following instructions. We see things like sensory sensitivities that may affect focus and productivity. Bright lights, loud noises, or other sensory stimuli can be really overwhelming for some neurodivergent individuals, impacting their ability to focus and be productive. A lack of understanding and support can contribute to that increased stress and anxiety level, affecting overall well-being and job performance. And negative attitudes or misconceptions about neurodiversity can lead to feelings of isolation and alienation among those neuro-minority employees. Without proper support and accommodations, most of which can be easily and cheaply put in place, neurodivergent individuals may miss out on opportunities to advance their careers. We also want to think about managers who are not offered any kind of neurodiversity in the workplace training, who may also experiencing challenges when leading diverse teams. Managers may feel unsure about how to provide the necessary accommodations for a neurodivergent team member or how to have conversations around the needs for additional support. Untrained managers may not be able to identify signs of stress or understand the unique challenges that might be faced by neurodivergent employees. and they may mistake behaviors that are linked to neurodivergence as performance management issues. A lack of knowledge around neurodiversity can hinder a manager's ability to foster that really inclusive, supportive team culture that bring out the best in all teams. And managers may go on to feel overwhelmed by the prospect of accommodating or supporting their team members effectively, unsure as to what is considered a reasonable adjustment or what may be classed as an individual being unable to perform their job role effectively. Managing a diverse team without adequate training can take a toll on the manager's own well-being and job satisfaction, and that can lead into a fall of performance. So to create a culture of inclusion, we need reasonable adjustments to be in place for all those that need them all of the time. Now, reasonable adjustments are going to be unique to each person, but also they're going to be unique to each workplace. We're fully aware here that a factory operating line is going to have a very different sensory input to a open plan office. And we know that different roles will suit different people. But what we want to do is allow individuals to have the same chance of success as everybody else. And the ways to do that can be quite small. I think a great way to start when it comes to adjusting workplace is actually asking your team members or your employees a really simple few questions. What do you need to be your best self at work? Or what can I do that makes work easier and more comfortable for you? And it's something that we can ask every single employee. It doesn't matter whether they're neurodivergent or neurotypical. It's just creating that level playing field where everybody can adjust their environment to work to their best. And we want to be proactive about this as well. Most reasonable adjustments are reactive. When the thing we could have already changed but haven't has had that negative impact on the person. For example, if a team member has disclosed to you that they have autism or ADHD and they're asking for adjustments, that is important to be considered. But we don't want people to have to always advocate for their own needs. If we just start by asking these questions proactively, for example, in our hiring process or when somebody moves into a new team, then we'll create the culture of inclusion from the very beginning. Have you ever thought about asking someone interview, how will your manager be able to help you thrive in the role? And not just asking as a tick box, but really asking with that genuine intent of helping that person be their best in the role. Now, reasonable adjustments must be unique to the individual person's own challenges, and they must be designed to give that person a level playing field within their role so that they can fulfill their full potential. And for some individuals to have that same chance of success as everybody else, there needs to be those reasonable adjustments in the workplace. But what's the difference between an inclusive workplace and a workplace that has an inclusive culture? Well, an inclusive workplace is often reactive in supporting those with additional needs. A workplace with an inclusive culture is proactive in supporting the needs of everyone. Now, one of the most common things we hear is that if people won't declare they need support, we can't help them. Now, remember, whether you agree with it or not, individuals don't have to declare that they're neurodivergent, be protected by the Equality Act. And some individuals don't even realize that they have a neurodifference. Relying only on reactive reasonable adjustments just doesn't make good business sense. What makes sense is proactive reasonable adjustments that make life easier for everyone. And you can see here some examples of where this reactive adjustment approach can work to the detriment. So changing job interview processes to reducing stress, but only if we're asked. Now, a great example of how you can do this proactively could be providing a list of interview questions to candidates beforehand. And you may kind of just have that instant reaction of, why would I do that? That's going to give them an unfair advantage. And then they're just going to have time to prepare and come up with the best possible answers that they can. Now, as somebody that's spent many, many years in recruitment positions, I don't think that's such a bad thing because in most workplaces, you're very rarely given spontaneous tasks. Yeah, we must think on our feet from time to time, but you're very rarely going to be thrown in like that in that stressful, unique position. Most likely, the skills that we're looking for is somebody who can understand what's being asked of them and bring their best solution. So actually, if we're providing a list of interview questions and asking our candidates to go away and really think about how they want to answer it, you're not only going to have better quality answers and a better idea of how this person might work, you're going to be reducing that overwhelm and anxiety for somebody who may struggle with their communication or may be neurodivergent without that person feeling they need to be asked to be supported. And that's where we can be really proactive. And you can see here as well, creating a quiet space for managing moments if asked. And I've already spoken how, particularly in an office space, it can be so beneficial to have a quiet, chilled out space for employees that might need it. We think about things like providing assistive technology only when asked. And it can feel like there might be financial burdens to offering everybody those in advance. But there's a lot more help for your organization than you might realize. And it may not be as expensive as you think. So asking that question right from the very beginning, what do you need to be your best self at work? And another really simple one, lumbar support chairs as well, or chairs that allow an individual more freedom of movement. Are these things that we can put in place for every employee, or do we wait to have that assessment based on each individual? Can we create a culture of inclusion right from that very start? So how about having a range of chairs an employee can decide on that suits them? The standard model of office chair can be actually really unhelpful for someone who is neurodivergent and needs to move about more. And we know that only relying on these reactive adjustments just doesn't make good business sense, as I've said before. If we're already thinking about these things proactively, it's going to improve our business, it's going to help us retain employees for much longer, and it's going to help us to attract talent, as this will show the culture is already geared towards inclusion. Yeah, we may then need to make individual adjustments further, but knowing that inclusion is already there means an employee is more likely to tell you their needs to thrive. Now, when it comes to neurodivergent differences, it is important to remember that each of our 7 main neuro differences that we discuss in the Thrive training are very distinct. However, we do see common challenges that are experienced, and one of these is to do with executive functioning. Now, executive function is basically your brain's ability to sort and manage multiple tasks, and we liken it to air traffic control. That ability to keep track of what planes are coming in, what planes are going out, and all of the various messages that are going back and forth. Now, this process of multiple factors, this processing of multiple information is what a neurotypical brain can typically do quite well. And of course, we may see within that neurotypical brain that in stressful situations or if it's tired, that executive function can start to struggle. That feeling we get when, we're trying our very best to complete tasks or to be organized, to remember things, but the outcome is just not what we hoped for. What we see in that neurodivergent community is that this type of executive dysfunction is a very common occurrence. But in the neurodivergent individual, it's likely to be a daily thing, not just something that only comes up when the person's stressed or overwhelmed. And in fact, for some, it's a near permanent state of being. And a neurodivergent individual often has to work really hard to try to compensate for that. And it's during these times, again, that proactive reasonable adjustments come into their own. It's important that we understand these shared experiences and we look deeper into each other's shared experience, looking at these throughout our training sessions so that we can learn to empathize, we can seek to understand before we cast judgment, not the other way around. Now, remember though, while we may see challenges for a neurodivergent person, this is because the world is set up for the neurotypical individual. And being neurodivergent doesn't mean that we're less intelligent, less capable. We just have a different way of processing the world around us. So we've seen before that being reactive doesn't always make good business sense and doesn't always support our employees in the best way possible. But let's look at some of those proactive adjustments. So we might think about clear job descriptions. This is really, really beneficial. And we've spoken about those interview questions already, but actually, how can we be clearer with the job description? So let's keep away from job descriptions that are busy trying to show our company culture or kind of values, and keep to ones that are clear categories on what the day-to-day will actually be. Exactly what is a minimum requirement to apply for the role, and what would be a nice to have but not essential. And if job descriptions are not clear in this way, it may be that, as an example, an autistic person who has very either or thinking that is focused on accuracy reads that job advert where it isn't clear what's expected and says, okay, I haven't got all of them, therefore I'm not going to apply. So I think being really clear about what is a necessity and what could be helpful within the job, making it clear that you don't need everything on that list to apply, so that we're not screening people out beforehand who just simply aren't understanding what it is that we're asking them to do in the job. And I'd kind of leave you with a bit of a challenge of maybe going back and having a look at this after our session. How many things in your company's job adverts are subjective or selling the company rather than being clear about the role? Now, in some roles, it might be appropriate in that interview process for a person to be able to show their ability to do a task rather than just talking about it. Let's say you're recruiting for a sales role. Rather than sitting across from that candidate and asking them about when they dealt with a difficult customer, or when they did a really good upsell, how can we create an environment where it's more of a role play, or we're setting them a task? Now, a task that I love and can be fun to do is choosing a random word and trying to fit that into a sales pitch. So a cauliflower, for example, and seeing how creatively that person can think about bringing that in to their sales pitch. And that shows a great creative thinker, somebody who is thinking outside of the box, not some in the moment panic response to tell me when they last upsold something. And we know that thinking outside the box and having this different perspective to tasks is a real skill of many neurodivergent brains. So let that neurodivergent individual show that to you rather than sticking to that same old formula for interviews, which don't allow different types of brains to shine. Perhaps having things like assistive software on all devices so that people don't have to ask for it if they need it. It's already there for them to use. Now, this could be as simple as the spell check program. So somebody who has dyslexia knows from day one that they have a really good quality spell check system in place. What does that tell that neurodivergent person about your culture compared to a set of values? Now, you may think we already have that. Word works absolutely fine. But the problem is with some softwares that are built in, like Microsoft Word, is that they don't look at the context of the sentence the person's written. So it could throw up the wrong word, the wrong suggested word that doesn't fit within the sentence the person's written. And if you're dyslexic, you may assume that that's right in terms of it being the right word for the situation, but actually it isn't. And using paid tools like Copilot while adding a small cost up front in dividends down. And there is some absolutely fantastic assistive software that is a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more intelligent than just your standard spell checks, meaning for a dyslexic person, it becomes a more reliable tool that sometimes is very cheap or even free to the employer. Now, for that person to have that reassurance, it means that they're in a safe place to be their best in the workspace. Sensory safe environments are also really important. And, in that workspace, in that office, having those spaces where people can step away to, even thinking about things as small as the light bulbs that you have can be important. Are we using those really harsh artificial overhead lighting? You might think we can't afford to replace all of those lights. Well, how much would it cost you when someone leaves because of that? Or someone comes to an interview who would be brilliant, but can't show that because they're overwhelmed by that harsh lighting in the moment. So what can we do to make that environment more comfortable for everyone, but particularly comfortable for somebody who may be on that verge of what we call sensory overload, where there's too many sensory inputs happening at once? Now, if a person works at home, what are you doing to encourage people to have sensory safe environments? If you do have lots of webinars like this, what are you doing to amend your slides to be more inclusive? You may or may have not noticed at this stage that all of our slides today have more of a blue background than a white background. And we also use the Vidana font at a fixed size. Now, both things have been intentional because studies have shown that this is the preferred font, and the black text on a white background can be very difficult for a neurodivergent individual to read and interpret. Of course, we also like to think that the slides still look professional, even if it's got a blue hue to it. So it hasn't affected our delivery whatsoever. We've just made that small adjustment without having to be asked to make it a little bit easier for people to interpret. Agendas for meetings is another big one. Being clear about what people can expect in team meetings or client meetings, making it clear if people can ask questions, if people can get up and they can stretch their legs, much like I did at the start of this webinar, creating a safe place from that very beginning so that people don't feel like they need to be vulnerable and ask for that support. Making sure your communication is simple to read. And if you can, go one step further by providing communication in different formats. Maybe you've got that process guide to read, and it's about how we might use a system or how we might do something. Have you considered making a video that sits alongside that, recording your screen while on the system, inputting client data as an example, so that if a person is dyslexic or they're overwhelmed by large amounts of information that's written down, rather than them struggling with reading that process guide, they can watch you do it instead. And again, we're also trying to make things better for everybody. The neurotypical person may learn much faster or much more efficiently by watching you do the action than reading what are quite boring, sometimes process-driven guides. Now, as I've said, proactive reasonable adjustments are about leveling that playing field, giving everybody more options at the table. And, we might go one step further and ask every employee to share their preferred communication methods. And here's just a final small adjustment that we might think about. Digital clocks that don't tick. Now, most offices and even our homes will have clocks. And so as small as thinking about what do the clocks say about inclusion? How easy are they to read? Not just for myself, but for other people as well. And do they have that really loud, constant tick? That TikTok may seem very, very low in terms of volume or priority to a neurotypical person. But for somebody that experiences sensory overload or maybe is on the verge of a meltdown, that tick can be adjusted in their head in terms of volume. Sensory overload can be all of that person's senses, all at the same intensity, all at the same time. And so, as an example, when I deliver training, I now ask for any analog clocks to be removed from the room. And by making that small adjustment to our way of working or the environment that I'm going to be in, I can really make a difference without someone feeling they need to ask, but can't because it might be seen as over the top by others. Now, we have already looked at and we know that neurodiversity means all of us. So the more that we can put into place this natural inclusion I've talked about, the better off we're all going to be. And I really invite you to start asking your colleagues this question. What do you need to be successful on your very worst day? So what do you need to be successful on your very worst day? Now, the answers may surprise you and the actions may be a lot simpler than you think. It's essential that we do understand and carry with us that neurodivergent individuals are not disabled by their condition. They're disabled by their environment. Now, we unfortunately live in a society that is built around favoring that neuro-majority, the neurotypical brain. And so what can we do in our own small way to create that inclusive culture, to be more proactive and seek to understand before we judge? Now, I've mentioned our training a few times, and I'm going to give you a little bit more detail, not a hard sell, just that overview. So our certified CPD neurodiversity in the workplace training stands out as a really valuable investment because with that CPD verification, you can be confident that our training content is based on the latest research and best practices. Thrive training is peer reviewed by independent charities that specialize in the particular condition or difference that we look at. CPD verification ensures that our training delivers measurable and meaningful outcomes for both the participants and your organizations. And when participants gain CPD points, enhancing their professional development and career prospects, it can lead to that employee feeling valued within the workplace. So investing in neurodiversity training can lead to significant benefits for your organization and its workforce. By working towards that inclusion and that culture of inclusion, teams can unlock diverse strengths, leading to an enhanced collaboration and overall productivity. Supporting those neurodivergent employees increases job satisfaction, it reduces turnover and savings that you might have in those recruitment processes. Training in neurodiversity helps employees and managers develop better communication and conflict resolution skills. And understanding and implementing reasonable accommodations ensures that compliance with your legal requirements. Remember, embracing neurodiversity demonstrates your commitment to inclusion, making your company more attractive to both customers and potential employees. So our certified CPD neurodiversity in the workplace training provides comprehensive coverage of all aspects relating to neurodiversity. We ensure that participants gain a deep understanding of the topic and its significance, and we give practical strategies for creating that inclusive work environment. We equip managers and employees with practical strategies to accommodate those diverse needs effectively. And this includes providing reasonable accommodations and fostering that environment where everybody can thrive. Participants will learn how to identify and address specific challenges that neurodivergent individuals may face in the workplace. And our training incorporates real life examples. We use shared lived experience to illustrate the experiences of neurodivergent individuals in the workplace. And by sharing these stories, we enhance empathy and understanding, creating a more compassionate and supportive work environment to really deliver on those aha moments, those get it moments. Now, our training sessions are highly interactive, they're engaging, and participants are encouraged but not forced. We encourage open discussion, group activities to promote active learning, and participants have the opportunity to share their insights, to ask questions, and collaborate with their colleagues, making the training enriching, empowering, and a really rememberable experience. The training materials are designed to cater for diverse learning preferences and needs, and participants will have access to multiple formats that include digital guides and workbooks. So in terms of the courses that are available, the Aware webinar is where it all starts, and it's delivered and designed so that it can be delivered online face-to-face if required. Now, this course must be taken before any of the others, as it provides a foundation of learning around the topic of neurodiversity in the workplace. And we want to think of the Aware session as that foundation of knowledge. You know, if we're going to build a house, we're going to build a building. To be sound, we must build that strong foundation first. And for a champion or a manager to use their additional learning, they need that strong foundation as well. The champion workshop can be delivered face-to-face or online. Personally, we will recommend to you that it's face-to-face, but outcomes are the same if we need to deliver virtually. Our manager's workshop breaks into two parts: a morning session covering that champion workshop, and then an afternoon session that's designed to create clear strategies to navigate challenging conversations and empower managers to have that confidence to lead a diverse team where everybody can thrive. Now, it could be that typical approach would be to deliver a session virtually for up to 60 people from our Aware format, ensuring that those that you want to have additional training attend that session. And then you may go on to deliver manager trainings for up to 16 people, and those 16 people are taken from those that have already attended your Aware session. And they might be in roles where they're responsible for managing, supporting teams or employees directly. And it could be that you decide then to train additional delegates with more in-depth knowledge around neurodiversity through that champion training. And for example, these might be mental health first aiders, they might be peer support group leads or advocates that you have in the workplace who've also already attended that aware session. Now, the champion delivery would again be for a maximum of 16 delegates. So in terms of what learners get for our aware sessions, that's CPD, certificate of attendance, they get a digital learning guide, and they get an editable PDF workbook. For our manager and our champion sessions, again, that CPD certificate of attendance, digital learning guide, editable PDF workbook, and they also get 3 years access to what we talk about as the Thrive Recap Hub. The digital learning guides can be used during the sessions, but they're also there to be reflective documents following on from the sessions as well. And as I mentioned, there is this option for the Thrive Resource Hub for those that complete the champion and the manager training. And within here, we have lots of documents, lots of videos that act as a reminder, but also act to extend that person's knowledge. So just before we look at any questions, I am going to pause the recording in a moment. And just to say, this will be that opportunity to answer any questions and ask anything that you would like to share within the chat. For those of you that may be watching the video back at a later stage, or you might be watching the video for the first time, thank you for doing so. And we will be closing the video off very shortly, just to make sure that anybody that's here on the live session has that opportunity to ask questions without worrying about that confidentiality. So for everybody, thank you so much for spending the 40 to 45 minutes with me. I really hope that it's given you a good insight into this topic of neurodiversity and what it's about when it comes to the workplace, why we need to look at it further and why it's so important. And hopefully with some little bits that you'll be able to go away and start doing. So thank you from me, and do look out for our other recordings.